I've been trying for some time to find a speaker on the water pollution, the sewage that's in the water. And you are in a Windrush Against Sewage Pollution. You've set up your own campaign on this. It's very amazing. If anyone goes to the website, Windrush Against Sewage Pollution in Oxfordshire, you've studied the effects of sewage on the river there. And I don't think there's been much put out on the media about this. Could you tell us what you've discovered about the impact of sewage on the local rivers? And also, could you tell us how you came to start the campaign?
Yeah, I can, absolutely. And it's fascinating listening to the speakers up until now, because that whole scenario is what's unfolding in the environmental sector around sewage pollution. It's fascinating that you haven't seen much on the media, because we're in the kind of little bubble where we see loads of it on the media. We've been on Panorama, ITV Tonight, a whole range of documentaries. Fergal Sharkey's a big speaker on this subject. You have the Surfers Against Sewage, the Rivers Trust, Wild Fish, Wild Justice taking a legal challenge against Ofwat, Wild Fish taking a challenge against the government. So yeah, we're in our little worlds, aren't we? And I've recognized so much of what your speakers have said up until now, and have tried to actually learn from so much of that as I've developed our own campaign, which has been going about 5 years. We started with, we were shocked to discover that the water industry was dumping untreated sewage in our rivers, and allegedly legally. We then moved on through the good fortune that I have that one of my colleagues is a top-notch data analyst and was able to expose widespread criminality through the water industry. And now we're at the stage of uncovering the scandal that is water privatization, and possibly the worst example of privatization that exists. And I think something that would be very useful for you to explore, because it brings in a link to wider inclusivity, which has been the theme of Paula, and certainly what Brendan was talking about just now. We are fortunate because our subject is very easy to get people to buy into. Who thinks it's a good idea to dump untreated sewage into our waters? Well, the ownership of the water industry does. Largely overseas funds, big wealth funds own the water industry, have put nothing into it over the last 33 years, and have, for every pound of bill payers' money that's been so-called invested, put back into the industry, those shareholders have taken 45 pence. It's been a massive exploitation of our water, which is now largely foreign owned. So what's not to like about dealing with that? So we've got a very good link across the political spectrum. Well, actually, we don't. We had a massive fallout with all of the MPs that were forced by government, all the Conservative MPs that were forced to vote out the strongest aspects of the Environment Act, and the Environment Act thus became really just protection for shareholders, not protection for the environment. So there is a very good link between what you're trying to achieve as a group and what we do, because we know, even now, we face it on a smaller scale. We still get, if you say the word nationalization to some people, they will develop a hatred for you just for saying that word. So, so we try to deal with that language, and we're talking more in terms of removing that exploitation. But the messaging has to be carefully delivered in a way that is palatable to groups, which will be I don't think there will be many people on this call. I've never been on this call before, but you're all fairly pretty left thinking people, socially aware people, and of course a lot of the power sits in another part of the country, and this is where we try to keep a hold with not people who are benefiting from that extreme capitalism, but have somehow been brought into through the media into thinking that unions are bad, wealth is good, even though they haven't got any, and they've been exploited through their whole lives. They will still tick the blue box because that's what they do. And we try to we've done it through being very honest, concentrating on being right all the time. You know, in the environmental world, the only people that you can trust to tell the truth are the campaigners. Therefore, the regulators routinely lie, demonstrably lie, and we have been very strong about not doing that. And equally, now we find ourselves coming into the room that you're in, because there are a lot of groups have developed around the country now. And how do we stop them without having some kind of coalition where you can't agree what day of the week it is without a meeting? How do we stop people going off on some crazy petition that is actually the wrong petition to have? And this is the stage that we're at now. So we are forming loose groups, loose coalitions of groups, concentrating on those that are not influenced by either grants from DEFRA or sponsorship from the water industry, because we know that the industry sponsors to manipulate quite a lot. And we try to learn from, I imagine many of your watchers will have seen Big Oil versus the World. That's a documentary on BBC that shows exactly how Big Oil managed to divide groups that were going to be victims of the consequences of Big Oil's pollution, but they managed to convince a bunch of them that if they didn't stop legislation by Obama, that their jobs would be attacked. And we see it now with all the stuff that Extinction Rebellion does and so forth, where people will be worried about, they will say that kind of activity stops people earning a living, and that divisive narrative comes in. And we've been really trying hard as a group to make sure that doesn't happen to us, and it's not easy.
So I mean, it's very interesting what you're saying about how you've built a campaign and you're very aware of the pitfalls with the media and way that the water authorities will try and divide you.
Yeah.
But if you go onto your website, you've made things very simple and clear. Yeah. As you say, and the information's all there. It seems like the water issue has. I mean, I'm saying it hasn't been much on the media, but there is definitely a trend of people thinking this is ridiculous, especially when there was a drought. Yeah. Or people weren't getting any water. I mean, that was kind of like, that was the worst thing they could have done, considering they're already dumping sewage, not to be able to actually supply water. Do you think that was a turning point as well?
It was very useful. That was one of the good turning points, because it brought in not only the people that were concerned about the environment, but it also brought in the lawn sprinklers and the car washers. They started to also hate the water industry for not supplying them. Now, once you've got those people on your looking in your direction, you can start to give them the rest of that story, and the other disadvantages to them, as when they want to go to the beach for a swim, they may well be swimming around in untreated sewage. And one of the first things that the new Secretary of State has done has been to make some kind of pointless statement about the water industry, but it shows that we've already got his attention. One of the early comments by Keir Starmer to Liz Truss has been to ridicule her for her stance on the water industry. So we've gone from people not really knowing anything about this to it being an issue that it's a voting issue now. People, and it's always been a case of, from right back in when I first started this off, the idea was that public concern was very high, but awareness was very low, and we need to get to that tipping point where so many people know about it that it will make a difference to their voting decision. And what I see is it in terms of a link in the rest of the social justice kind of issues, is that it is one that brings in everybody, because I think if you know, from an outsider's point of view, it's very easy to see a dividing line between the groups that are probably on this call, and then there's a stopping point where you stop at not people that are benefiting from all of the ills that you're trying to deal with, people that are suffering from those ills but don't realize it, because it's very hard for them to even listen to the conversations that are had by what are regarded as far left groups. Therefore, you've only got to say far left to some people, and they won't even look at won't even look in that direction.
I find what you're saying about the need to win over people not in your, as you call it, like we've heard this word, silo. I find that very interesting, because that isn't really spoken about very much on what we call the left. We're trying to win over our sections.
That's it.
Rather than moving a bit further out and broadening the message, it's quite demoralizing to do that. We're not doing that, and I think it's inspiring to hear you on this whole thing. I've got to move on, but it'd be good to catch up with you again, especially when you're back in Blighty, whatever you call it. Are you missing Are you missing it here?
We've come over for a week to see family in Berlin, and while I'm here, I generally tend to have a look at how they deal with sewage pollution in Germany and bring some of that back. It's a great holiday to have.
Well,
you can imagine
going to the sewage in Germany. Thank you
Pleasure.
very much.
Nice to meet you all. Thanks a lot. Cheers.